He found my journal on the table, read a line, then looked at me differently. I never thought a single moment could completely transform a relationship. You know those pivotal instances that divide your life into before and after? This is the story of one such moment, when my roommate Jake found my journal sitting on our kitchen table. Let me start by explaining why this journal mattered so much to me. I've kept journals since I was 12 years old, filling countless notebooks with my most private thoughts, fears, and dreams. This particular leather-bound journal had been with me through 3 years of college, documenting everything from failed exams to failed relationships, from late-night existential crises to early morning epiphanies. It was more than just a collection of words. It was a map of my evolving identity, containing parts of myself I wasn't ready to share with anyone. The journal had become my trusted confidant during a particularly challenging semester. I was struggling with classes, questioning my career path, and wrestling with complicated feelings for someone I shouldn't have feelings for. Jake, my roommate of 2 years. We'd started as random housing assignments and gradually became close friends, sharing everything from midnight pizza to deep conversations about our futures. But somewhere along the way, my feelings had shifted into something more, something I couldn't acknowledge even to myself, except in the pages of my journal. I typically kept my journal hidden in my desk drawer, tucked beneath folders and textbooks. But that Wednesday afternoon, I'd been writing at the kitchen table while waiting for water to boil for tea. When my phone rang with a call from my academic advisor, I hurried to my bedroom to take it, completely forgetting about the open journal on the table. The call lasted longer than expected, nearly 40 minutes of discussing schedule changes and graduation requirements. By the time I hung up, I'd completely forgotten about the journal. When I finally emerged from my room, my heart nearly stopped. Jake was home early from his internship, standing in our kitchen, my open journal in his hands. The moment seemed frozen in time. The afternoon sunlight streaming through our apartment windows, the distant sound of traffic outside, and Jake's expression shifting as his eyes moved across the page. I remember every detail of that moment with painful clarity. Jake was still wearing his navy blue work shirt, his messenger bag dropped carelessly by the door. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, probably from the wind outside. And his eyes, those familiar brown eyes that I'd seen express everything from excitement to exhaustion, were now widening with something I couldn't quite identify. "Jake," I managed to say, my voice barely audible even to myself. "What are you doing?" He looked up, and that's when everything changed. His expression wasn't angry or disgusted as I had feared. Instead, there was something like wonder there, mixed with confusion and perhaps a hint of vulnerability that I'd never seen before. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, closing the journal. I came in and saw it open. I only read a line or two before I realized what it was, but he paused, and the silence between us felt electric with unspoken words. The line he had read, I later learned, was from an entry I'd written just days before. Sometimes I catch myself watching him when he doesn't notice, memorizing the way he laughs or how he runs his hand through his hair when he's stressed. And I wonder if friendship is supposed to feel this way, like you're constantly balancing on the edge of something both terrifying and wonderful. In that moment, standing in our sun-drenched kitchen with my heart pounding in my chest, I felt completely exposed. It was as if Jake had accidentally opened a door I'd kept carefully locked, and now neither of us knew quite what to do. The vulnerability was overwhelming, like standing naked in a crowded room, unable to hide or run away. "How much did you read?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat. Jake placed the journal carefully on the table, treating it with a gentleness that surprised me. "Just that paragraph about friendship, and wondering if it's supposed to feel a certain way." His voice was careful, measured, as if he was walking on ice that might crack beneath him. "Let me explain why this matters so much. In our digital age, we rarely commit our true feelings to paper anymore. There's something profoundly intimate about handwritten thoughts that can't be deleted or edited. They stand as permanent testimony to our most authentic selves. Having those private reflections discovered feels like the ultimate exposure." The silence between us stretched uncomfortably. I couldn't read his expression. Was he uncomfortable? Pitying? Disgusted? I braced myself for the awkward conversation that would follow, the careful distancing, the polite but firm establishment of boundaries. "I should have put it away," I said finally, moving to take the journal. It's just random thoughts, nothing. Is that how you feel? Jake interrupted, his question hanging in the air between us. About me? The directness of his question caught me off guard. In all our years of friendship, we developed an unspoken agreement to keep things light, to never venture into territory that might complicate what we had. But now, with those words from my journal lingering between us, the carefully constructed walls were beginning to crumble. I don't know what you mean, I said, attempting a casual laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. Jake took a step closer, and I noticed something in his expression I'd never seen before, a kind of hopeful uncertainty. The way you described friendship in your journal, balancing on the edge of something terrifying and wonderful. I've been feeling that too, but I never knew how to say it. His words hit me like a physical force. For months, I'd convinced myself that my feelings were one-sided, that Jake saw me as nothing more than a convenient roommate and good friend. I'd written in my journal partly to process these emotions, to work through them and eventually move past them. Never once had I considered that he might be experiencing the same internal struggle. You have. My voice was barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture I described in my journal. For a while now. But I was afraid of ruining what we have. Our friendship means too much to me to risk it on feelings that I wasn't sure you shared. The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had before. We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the journal placed on the coffee table between us like a third presence in the room. For hours, we talked, really talked, about the subtle shift in our relationship that we'd both felt but never acknowledged. Jake admitted that he'd started seeing me differently after a night last semester when I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. helping him prepare for a major presentation. You were so passionate about making sure I did well, he said, even though it had nothing to do with your own studies. Something changed for me that night. I told him about the moment I realized my feelings had deepened, when he'd driven 4 hours to pick me up after my car broke down during a weekend trip, never once complaining about the inconvenience. Friends do that for each other, he said simply, but we both knew it was more than that. The vulnerability of that conversation was both terrifying and liberating. Having my private thoughts exposed had forced us into a new territory of honesty that we might never have reached otherwise. Each confession, each shared moment of realization, felt like stepping further into uncharted waters. I'm still scared, I admitted as evening fell and our apartment grew dark around us. What if this changes everything? What if we try this and it doesn't work, and we lose what we already have? Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering my words. I think everything's already changed, he said finally. The question is whether we're brave enough to acknowledge it. That night marked a turning point in our relationship. We didn't rush into anything. There was too much at stake for impulsive decisions. Instead, we agreed to be intentional, to explore these new feelings while being honest with each other every step of the way. The weeks that followed were both wonderful and challenging. There were awkward moments, certainly. The first time he reached for my hand while we were watching a movie, the slight hesitation before our first kiss, the careful navigation of new boundaries and expectations. But there was also a deepening connection, a sense that we were finally allowing ourselves to be fully known by each other. My journal, once a private repository for thoughts I couldn't speak aloud, became something of a shared space. Not that Jake read it regularly. We established clear boundaries around privacy, but I began to share certain entries with him, and he started writing me letters in response. There was something powerful about seeing our evolving relationship documented in writing, about having a tangible record of our journey from friends to something more. 6 months after that fateful day in our kitchen, Jake and I were sitting at the same table where he'd found my journal. We were celebrating the end of the semester, sharing a bottle of wine, and talking about our plans for the summer. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't left my journal out that day? I asked. If you hadn't read that particular line? Jake considered the question, swirling the wine in his glass thoughtfully. I think we would have gotten here eventually, he said. But it might have taken us a lot longer. Sometimes you need something to crack open the door before you can walk through it. His words stayed with me long after that conversation. I've thought often about the role of chance in our lives, how a single forgotten journal, a moment of curiosity, and a line of honest writing could set in motion such profound changes. But I've also thought about courage. The courage it takes to put your true feelings on paper, and the courage it takes to acknowledge them out loud. The journal still sits in my desk drawer, but it's no longer a secret repository of unspoken feelings. Instead, it's a reminder of how vulnerability, though frightening, can be the pathway to deeper connection. Every relationship requires some element of risk, some willingness to be seen in all your messy, complicated humanity. Looking back now, I realize that the moment Jake looked at me differently after reading my journal wasn't the end of something, as I'd feared, but the beginning. It was the first honest look between two people who had been hiding parts of themselves, the first acknowledgement that there was something more between us than we'd been willing to admit. We all keep certain thoughts to ourselves, tucking them away in private corners of our minds, or, in my case, in the pages of a journal. But sometimes, those thoughts need to be set free, whether intentionally or by accident, for us to move forward. The line between friendship and love can be blurry and frightening to cross, but on the other side might be something even more beautiful than what you left behind. I still write in my journal almost every day, documenting this new chapter of my life with Jake. But now I write with the understanding that our deepest truths, even when they terrify us, are often the ones most worth sharing. And sometimes, the most meaningful connections begin with a single line, read by chance, that changes the way someone looks at you forever. If you're holding back feelings for someone important in your life, I don't necessarily recommend leaving your journal out for them to find. But I do believe in the power of honest words to transform relationships. The risk of vulnerability is great, but the potential reward, being truly seen and accepted for who you are, is greater still. As for Jake and me, we're still writing our story, one day at a time. And while I don't know how it will end, I'm grateful for that afternoon when my forgotten journal opened the door to a deeper understanding between us. Sometimes the moments that terrify us the most become the ones we treasure forever. Total_char_count, 13,165.